Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of Verta Stars Podcast fourth season. How my loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. This is an amazing episode because Katie Leigh boards the mothership to discuss the adventures of the Gummi Bears, Muppet Babies, and Darkwing Duck. Now come on board as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Miss Leigh. Thanks for coming to Versa Stars Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So my pleasure. You voice a lot of my favorite cartoons, so I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I always start off with a question of inspiration. What inspired your love for acting, and who your earliest influences?
My love for acting has just grown as I've done it over the years, actually. I mean, I've always been a fan, but I never anticipated to be an actress when I was growing up. So, yeah, I just kept doing it. Check cleared, kept doing it, like it better. And, now I've got 40 plus years of experience. But as far as animation, as far as influences, the cartoons I watched growing up had a big influence on my sense of humor, I think. Rocky and Bullwinkle, Fractured Fairy Tales, some of those, and then actors on TV, Lily Tomlin, the comedians, Carol Burnett, huge. Yeah.
Well, like I said, you've had, like I said, a very long career, especially as a voice actor. What have you noticed? And like I said, it's continued into present. What have you noticed difference? The biggest difference is between being a voice actor in the past to being a voice actor now.
Well, as you see, I'm sitting in my home studio, and I never had a home studio until about 10, 15 years ago. So that's a big change, recording from home. We always had to be in Hollywood. We had to be able to go to the studios in Hollywood, and obviously that's changed a lot since COVID. And now you can be anywhere.
So, from the differences between now and the past, what do you think are the best or the biggest benefits, and what do you think is the biggest challenge in the how things have changed?
Start with the biggest benefits. The biggest benefits are obviously being able to work in your pajamas, and that makes it easier. But the negatives, I guess, there's a lot more non-union work than there was, so that's a plus for people who aren't union. But those who are, there's a lot less work union-wise for voice actors. The talent pool has increased incredibly. And, when I talk about union work, very few voice actors, I think, are going to have the ability to qualify for pensions in the future like we did in the past
Really?
because it's based on the amount of work you do. And if only 30% of the work is union, you're not going, you might make a living, but you won't be able to get your health insurance or your, pension like union actors can do if they qualify. So it makes it a lot harder for that to, so you're really on your own, much more so than being an actor 20 years ago. And the other drawback is that we're not all working together. We don't have that vibe of all being in the same room together and playing off of each other. Sometimes we will record remotely with everybody, and that helps a lot. It's still different than going to work and getting to use their espresso machine and all the good stuff, right?
So, back in the
We
day,
have to supply our own snacks.
so back in the day when you were in the studio with the other actors, how did that just enhance a performance? Um, how does it is it costly to the studios to not let you guys work off each other?
Well, I mean, first of all, you can develop more of a relationship with your other actors just waiting to go into the studio and in between takes, and you get to know each other. So there's that camaraderie. I mean, look, we're on Zoom right now. Can I look you in the eye? No, not really, right? But if you're across the room, I can hear, and I can hear your delivery, so I can, play off of it or look at your face or get a feel or even touch another actor if we're doing something. And the other thing is, when you're in a studio, my booth, I mean, depending on what your house is able to give you. My booth is only 4x4. If I'm in a studio, I can wave my hands and do all kinds of things that I have restrictions in here. So
Yeah.
it limits, I think, what an actor can do.
Now, one thing that was kind of interesting, looking at some of the shows that you've been on, we'll go more into more detail later. But looking at the cast of these, especially the Disney shows seem to have a lot of the same actors go from one series to another series to another series. For instance, like Jim Cummings, Darkwing Duck. He was in also I'm trying to remember the other show he was on with you as well, but
Gummy bears.
Gummy Bears as well. Um, how does it change when you get familiar with some of these actors who you're in with one series after another after another?
How does it change? It's just it gets better. You're more comfortable working with each other. You can even give each other suggestions sometimes based on what you know about the other actor, you know? Um, Being comfortable with your cast members takes time when you start a series, but if you already know somebody, it makes it a lot easier to transition.
Now, because it was all a lot of those shows were connected to Disney, was it? I mean, was it almost like a group of you that were just like contacted, like, "Hey, everyone, do the show," or was it just the
No,
just
we still auditioned.
yeah?
Yeah, but the thing is, just like with any business, if you have a plumber come over and you really like the guy and you feel like you can trust them and they're reliable and they know what they're doing, a studio is going to tend to want to cast people they've worked with before, even though everybody auditions, two things being equal, and they know me, but they don't know you, they might say, well, let's just go with Katie because we've already established a relationship with her. We already
Mhm.
know what she can. A lot of times your audition doesn't cover everything you've done, but if you've worked on another show before and you've played multiple characters, they know your range.
Yeah,
Does that
and
make sense?
you've had such a great range of characters too. So I'm just gonna name some of the shows that only a few of the ones that you voiced, and some of the ones that the one reason naming these because these are also ones that I like growing up because I was an '80s kid. So these are some of my favorites. So you worked on these legendary series, The Adventures of the Gummy Bears,
Hmm.
Darkwing Duck, Muppet Babies, and Dungeons and Dragons, which are four of the shows I always remember watching growing up. So these shows are not just successful, they are in the realm of legendary. I mean, people who are my age,
Lucky me, right?
right. I mean, the people who are my age still talk about, like Darkwing Duck. They're still talking about now rebooting the show. These shows have lasted and endured. So I guess a couple of questions is, what's the key to your success, and how are you hitting gold in these choices that you're making? I mean, are you just kind of taking the role, or are you finding out about the character and just knowing that this is going to be this type of show that's going to be a hit?
Nobody has any way of knowing. I think my secret is being cast in really good shows. I've been very fortunate. And I think what makes some shows, those things legendary, being in the right place at the right time. How many channels did you have in the 80s? There's a collective consciousness. People your age watch the same stuff, where nowadays you can pick whatever you want to watch, right?
Mhm.
So I think up until 10 years ago, people shared, a common thing. Everybody got up on Saturday morning and watched the same shows. It isn't the case anymore. So that makes that fan base a lot bigger, a lot more cohesive, in my opinion. It seems that it works that way. I mean, I didn't say, oh, I'm going to be on this show because I think it's going to last. Who knew?
when
Who
when the
knew?
when the show was being taped and you started watching it, reading the scripts, and I know the animation usually comes after the recordings, but
Correct.
eventually, I imagine when it was released, were you watching would you watch the cartoons that you
Yeah,
voiced?
as often as I could. Yeah, then we got DVRs. We could record it if we weren't at home, right? It's not, now I see so many things I can look on YouTube, but stuff we could never see when it was airing. And now somebody saved it and put it on, YouTube, and you can find so many things that things weren't accessible like that in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was kind of crazy. Because in the great thing when I contacted you because I wanted to talk a bunch of the Gummy Bears. And then as I was looking, through your IDMB, I was looking at other shows like, oh, I remember that show, like the Muppet Babies. And I was looking for where Babies was streaming, and I couldn't find it except for YouTube. Someone had recorded all the episodes and posted up to YouTube, so I got to watch it all on YouTube. And I was like, oh my God, who would have thought that these people, I guess they recorded them on VHS and they just held them on.
I
They must have been
guess. I
for
mean, they
40
aren't the
years.
best recordings, and clearly we're not getting any residuals off of YouTube.
True, true. I am surprised that Muppet Babies isn't streaming somewhere, the original
Yeah,
cartoon.
you and me both, but if you think about it, Disney bought it and then
Yeah.
they rebooted it with a whole other cast, with a different contract, a different deal. And it doesn't seem like they have any intention at this point to release it. And there's not much we can do about it. Maybe a big, huge letter writing campaign. I don't know.
Well, the new one didn't have the charm of the original. Maybe because I was just younger back in the day, so it just had that charm. But there's something about the original animation that just looked fantastic. And you played Ralph, Ralph the dog, which again
Yes,
a
I
very
did, as a matter of fact. Yes, I did.
that's
Play the
awesome.
piano.
Yeah, and I remember watching and like my memories were just flooding back as I was watching the episodes again, and I couldn't help but think of something that maybe it was easy, but to me it didn't seem like it would be because Ralph has a lot of songs that he's singing. Is it hard to sing in voice, like in the character voice? Because it's not you singing, but it's still you got to do it like the character would.
Yeah. I think it's easier for me to sing in character than it is for me to sing, period.
Really?
Yeah, because I'm not a great singer, but when you get to sing in character, then I think it's a lot more forgiving
Mm.
if you're like my husband is a singer and he has perfect pitch and he says I'm the highest paid singer in the family, but I don't sing as well as he does because I don't, I just yeah, I mean, and we had help. We had coaches in the studio to help us, get, didn't come easy. Some of the actors in the show were really good singers, so they could just knock it out. For me and Howie Mandel, it was a little harder. Greg
Well,
Berg, harder.
so how are you finding the voice for Ralph? Because also we knew the Muppet Ralph from the Muppet movies, but you're doing the baby Ralph. So how did you locate that voice?
Well, when I did the audition, I mean, I watched a Muppet movie to see who I could audition for because I was a huge Muppet fan and I wanted to be in the show. And I I don't know, I guess I just liked Rolf, and to me, I was imitating him, but because I'm not Jim Henson, it sounded different, and I didn't even try to make him sound like a baby. It didn't even occur to me. I just, I remember, I think it was The Great Muppet Caper was the movie I rented from Blockbuster, and we're watching it, and he says, it pays to know a second language, and I just liked I just tried to sound like him and put his character on, and I mean, I remember him because when I was a little girl, we used to watch the Jimmy Dean show, and Rolf was on that show. So it was a character that I kind of grew up with, and I don't know, I just related to him. And even the director said I was one of very few people who even knew who Rolf was. So, yeah, so I just thought I was being him, but because I'm me doing it, it sounded acceptable for Rolf as a baby.
And I think it's so cool because um I mean
It's
honestly we
having
also
the attitude, thinking, yeah, I'm this cool kind of dog that plays, like this and
discussed it. I mean you were Sonny Gummy, which sounds totally different than Ralph, and Muddlefoot sounds totally different than Ralph. I mean that's a hell of a range of voices to go from Sonny to Ralph to and Muddlefoot.
thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate that evaluation very much. And yeah, and does my hair look all right?
That's awesome. Now, I mean, are you just naturally good at ranging your voice, or did you practice that?
Apparently. You know, uh, yeah, and when I do coach voiceover, it's kind of just about putting on that character. And also I tell people, our ears are more important than our voices. Because if you can hear something, you can maybe reproduce it. Yeah, I don't, you know what? Yeah, I didn't realize, frankly, I've been doing this 40 plus years, and I didn't realize till about 10 years ago that I do have a pretty wide octave
Yeah.
range. I didn't even think about it, but now that I've learned things like from my husband, like, oh yeah, I guess I do. And so I'm just thankful and blessed with that ability.
How long does it take you? We're talking about like Ralph and Sonny and Motorfoot, and we're talking about a couple of others. How long does it take you to try to like find that voice? And when you're not playing the voice for a while, is it hard to locate it again, or is it just like
No, because
a
they'll
replay?
play you a reference. If you go to I've those characters I did for about 8 years each, right? So
Hmm.
you kind of know who they are. They're just in there. They just live inside of you. But when you go to the studio, if you haven't worked, like you've been off for a few months, they'll play you a reference and that'll get you back in. And then a lot of times actors will use a hook. Like I just showed you my hook for Rolf, right?
Yeah.
What's a phrase you use that gets you back into character? Uh, like honker, maybe. Excuse me, Mr. Ballard, but Gosalyn, and you know your posture too changes when you're those characters. Rolf's pretty cool, and you know, Sunny's just young, and she's got that kind of thing going on. I why doesn't anybody ever listen to me? Which is actually kind of similar to Fizzy on My Little Pony too.
Hmm. So when you're doing the voice acting in the studio or in your personal studios, are you fully acting? I mean, are you like going like your whole body into it, or is it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't, you're cheating the audience of a good performance. And you kind of have to. It's like being on stage, but you have to stay on mic.
Yeah.
So, yeah, nobody sees your face, but you've got to communicate. And the other thing, when I'm coaching, I tell people, and I work on a radio program too, Adventures in Odyssey, and we've been doing that for 37 years. So people can't see you. So you can't use your face per se to communicate. So if I'm going to smile, of course you want to hear it in my voice, but maybe just a little giggle so you know that I'm smiling. If you're going to wink, I mean, what sound can you make that's going to communicate that? Like, something that people associate with a wig, and it's just little things that the animators can draw to, but you're you have to add sound to things that most people don't think of. Like you can't throw something and not have an effort sound because nobody will know you did it, right?
Well, and I can't help but think, also the animation because they said the animation usually happens after the voice work,
Yep.
correct?
In
So,
original animation, yes.
which I kind of feel like it's similar to how the function is when you're acting against the green screens nowadays on CGI acting, because again, you're acting against nothing. Is it, especially now that you're doing it separately without seeing even the other actors in the studio, how much of imagination is it taking you to try
A
to
lot.
vision, right?
I mean, you still have to imagine anyway, even if the other actors are there. You don't, unless you can see a storyboard, which I don't even know that they do anymore. We used to at least be able to look at these drawings, storyboards, to kind of get an idea of what's going on. And usually only the director had a storyboard, but you could go take a peek if you wanted to. So it's all imagination. That's why it's so exciting when the show comes out because everybody wants to know what it looks like. We don't know. We really don't know until it's produced.
And when you saw the cartoons for the first time, I had to assume that you just saw it and you went, "This is a winner." Like with these shows, especially the ones
No, you're
that,
like, wow, this is great, but who know? You don't know.
yeah.
There's no way to know.
I mean, even the theme songs are fantastic to these shows.
Yeah, I mean, you hope it is. You figure something associated with Jim Henson's going to be successful.
Hmm.
You hope it will be, right? Trying to think what other shows. I mean, even Yeah, no. I mean, look, Dungeons and Dragons has this huge following, and every time I would go when it was first aired, it would get interrupted by football. I don't know how the fans even managed to follow it, and they still care about it. You know, we had our
Hmm.
40th anniversary and a big panel at San Diego Comic-Con. You can see it on YouTube.
Yeah.
It was great. It was a great panel. Um, but it seemed like they were just doing, CBS was doing everything they could to make sure nobody saw it. So you don't know. You hope. The only thing you know is back then, because we sort of had cartoon season, when May rolled around and your agent got a call and you hear we're going to do season 2 or season 3, you're like, okay, we're doing it again. But you just don't know until the network, they go through all their corporate stuff and they decide what's going to come on again and how many shows they're going to order, and you wait to hear.
I mean, the cast of Muppet Babies was, as you mentioned, it was impressive. You had Howie Mandel as a regular, Dave Coulier was a regular, Frank Welker returned quite often. I mean, that's a great cast. So, what was it
Well,
like to
Frank
be
was
on the show?
Kermit. He
Frank
was
Frank
baby
Welker, Frank.
Kermit.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I was thinking a different one, but yeah, Frank Welker. Well, once again, Megatron for everyone who from my friends would know him from that as well. That's a hell of a cast. So, what was it like to be in a room with each other? And I assume this was one of the early parts of Howie Mandel's career too. I don't.
Yeah, I don't think Howie did a cartoon before this, and then he pretty much left the show, took the same voice, and created Bobby's World.
Hmm.
So Dave took Howard's place, and you know, m- I'm trying to think. Well, I didn't know Barbara Billingsley before we did the show, and that was fabulous. You know, growing up watching Leave It to Beaver, to have her be part of the cast was terrific. I already knew Frank pretty well. Didn't know Dave till he came on the show, but he was somebody I had wanted to meet. And he didn't get Full House until after he was on Muppet Babies, because I remember him getting the call. Um, Rusey I knew, Frank I knew, Greg I knew. So, that's the thing. You're your friends, like, oh, great, we get to work together again.
So, and like I said, with Darkwing Duck, you worked with Jim Cummings, we mentioned before.
Mhm.
What was Jim like working with?
Jim's fantastic. He's great. He's a great guy. He's a great actor. We had worked on Dumbo Circus together prior to that. And that was his first show. So when he came on that show and I saw how talented he was, I mean, I think I can go down in history as being the person who said, "Jimmy, you're gonna have a really big career." And has.
Actors, voice actors, some who stayed and became, super famous, some who obviously would disappear. What separates those who who have the great careers like you have, and those who you're fine, kind of like disappear?
Boy, that's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know. I think it depends on how people live their lives. Depends if they're nice and people like working with them sometimes. It depends, I don't know. The grace of God. I really can't say. I mean, for sure, I can say what would make somebody not want to work with someone, and that kind of is obvious. If you're a jerk, if you cause problems, if you show up late, if you're not friendly, if you don't play well with others, yeah, people are going to avoid you. But besides knowing what isn't going to sustain your career, I cannot say what keeps it going. I mean, just have faith. I have a personal faith in God, and I just trust God. Like, I've been off of work pretty much for a few weeks, but I knew other stuff was going to come, and sure enough, next week I got a bunch of stuff to do. And a lot of, things just happen. And I think waking up, having a sense of expectancy, expecting that something's going to happen, and keep doing things. I stay in contact with people. I try to, you have to audition all the time, and most of the time that isn't even where the work comes from. It's just this universal perpetual motion that you just have to trust. And you can't be desperate. There was a time in my life when I was a substitute teacher and barely worked at all, and I thought, I guess I'm never going to be a voice actor again. And then things changed and I became more relevant. I built a studio when other people didn't, and I started doing work that other people didn't want to do, and it's kept me busy. And you can't try to, it's like who moved my cheese, and you got to follow the cheese.
I think Sunny was they did a great job with their character. How did
Thank you.
you define her character for yourself as you're performing her?
Well, she was a big sister, and I was a big sister, and she wanted her independence, right? And I can relate to that. Um, yeah, I think we get cast in parts that we can relate to the most. And I think there's just something in the casting process that um, helps determine that. And it's unspoken, it's just kind of the way it is. Another friend of mine I have a podcast as well, a show called Tell You Later. And we're on YouTube as well. And also we're Patreon supported. Tell Ya Later, Tellya later. I started it with my buddy Will Ryan, who is also on the Gummy Bears.
Oh, wow,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, and many shows we did together, Adventures in Odyssey together. What is my point? Oh, I had a guest on my show who said when he was trying to figure out what genre of voiceover he would work in, and somebody coached him and just said, your genre will find you, and I think your characters will find you too.
So I think one thing I would like you to do is then send me a link to your show so I can put it in the show notes. So if you're
Sure.
listening to the show, check the show notes, but we'll find that podcast show.
Yeah,
We put
yeah.
it in
Tell you
there.
later. It's great. It's where you learn so much about so little, and vice versa. It's voiceover, pop culture, and beyond. Yeah.
That sounds absolutely awesome. I gotta check that out now.
I
I will
wish
definitely
you
put it in the link.
would. Yeah, we've been doing it for 4 years, and it's been a fun challenge. And I try to get people on even people that are not famous. Some people are, but some people aren't. But I think their stories and their careers are very interesting. So I love them to come on and share about that. So yeah, it's super fun. I'm an author too. I don't know if you know that.
No, I did not. Tell me.
Yes, and I have a book this came out last year. It's called The Itty Bitty Book of Codependency. It has nothing to do with cartoons, but it is a cartoon book. It's illustrated. So,
That's so cool.
yeah, it's on Amazon. If people can go to my website, katielee.com, if they want an autographed copy. And yeah,
Well,
that's one of the things I do.
that'll be well, you definitely got yourself a new subscriber. So when you send me the link, I'm definitely gonna subscribe to your podcast. So thank you so much.
Awesome.
The book also make sure you send me the link to your website. I'll make sure that goes in the show notes as
It's
well.
just, yep,
Because
katielee.com.
that's I mean that's absolutely fantastic. So with the podcast, is there guests? You said you had regular guests on there. So who are some of the people that have been on your show?
Yeah, well, we've had Chris Anthony Lansdowne, who's the original voice of Barbie, Townsend Coleman, who people know as Michelangelo in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We've also worked together on Adventures in Odyssey. Kimmy Robertson, who works on Odyssey, but she was also in Twin Peaks. We've had Byron Wagner on, who's a audiobook guy, but he also invented ISDN, the codec for ISDN, created that. Very smart. People who run Comic Cons, comic book writers.
Wow.
Yeah, a variety of people. Yeah. The one when Will was alive, because he's no longer with us, and so I've been trying to carry on the show without him. It was fun when we did it together, but he had some great friends. One was the head writer on the David Letterman show. He's been on the show a couple times, and we just have fun. Teddy Ruxpin, Will and I and Phil Barron worked on Teddy Ruxpin, so actually Teddy is Phil Barron. He's been on the show. Yeah, a lot of fun things. A
Oh,
lot
I
of
like your guest
nostalgic
list.
stuff. Yeah, you should watch it.
I will totally watch it. You're a very cool guest list. So many of them I'm envious of. So thank you. That's awesome. So when in doing the because as someone now you got me curious as someone who's doing my own pod. This is my I'm in my fourth season of my show. Um,
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you so
hard to
much.
do.
I appreciate it. Um, so what do you find you're learning the most by doing the show? Because I know I've learned a lot doing my own this podcast and talking to people who are obviously successful in different fields, such as you are. What are you learning while doing your podcast?
Learning how to be a better listener and trying not to interrupt.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that pretty badly. I'm sorry.
And that has taken me a long time, and I certainly haven't mastered it. Because part of our show is why it came up with the title Tell You Later, too, is we interrupt, we jump from subject to subject, so you never get to hear the whole thing sometimes. I guess learning how to, my husband is the crew of one, the producer, so learning how to work with him and learning about cameras even. Like when we
Hmm.
first started the show, we had the phone, we record on our phone, and the phone was facing us. And when Townsend came on, he said, "You're supposed to turn that around. You're not supposed to be looking at yourself when you're doing this," that made a big difference. So I mean, from square one, we knew nothing. So anything I've learned, how I look on camera. Uh, stuff like that, and then different equipment. We just got some
Hmm.
new mics so that we
Hmm.
can wear it on our clothes and walk around and be heard. So that's
Classy.
exciting. So we could actually go outside now and record stuff.
That's awesome. I remember people who see the first season of this show will definitely notice rookie mistakes.
Oh yeah.
In editing, I interviewed this one person who, for better or for worse, is one of my bigger episodes I had from a view count standpoint, because it was early on. So when you watch the show, there's about a good 10 minutes of the episode, and people who watch the show probably know what I'm talking about. Then, because I guess I didn't edit when I was editing, it was my newest edit, I didn't pull the video together, but I made a cut. So there's like a 5 minute gap where there's nothing happening, and
Oh
then it starts
no.
up again. And the thing that gets me is that people, because the person was it's someone who apparently people click on a lot because it has a lot of views. But it's like, oh, they're gonna see like this, like think that I'm such a screw because it's like the 5 10 minutes of good episode, then like that break where there's like nothing, and then it
But
just
at least they can fast forward and find out if there's anything else because they can see how long it is. So, yeah, and you guys
totally
are savvy. You can figure it out. Like, oh, well, something happened and the big mystery.
talking to someone who is an expert in a field that I'm obviously never done before. But you're talking to people as an expert who are also people from your field. How does that change maybe the dynamic of the conversation? Is there a shorthand talking to the people who are doing what you do?
Yeah, I have a feeling sometimes we reference people that are mutual friends that nobody knows who we're talking about. So that's not very good because it might sound like a bunch of inside jokes or something. But yeah, I have to be aware of that. And also, I try to be aware because we have listeners who are vision impaired. So I want to remember to describe things that we're doing so people know what we're doing.
Oh
Because,
yeah.
yeah.
You're talking to guests from a range of the shows that you're doing.
Hmm.
Um, which has been your favorite guest from within that range of the stuff that you've been on before?
Well, my best friends, it's just because we're just like having conversations. So, Will, who I started it with, and then Chris, Anthony Lansdowne, we've done some things dressed up as witches. We've done some things just being real silly. And that's just fun, or like kind of like Lucy and Ethel. So that's pretty fun. One time we built a vocal booth, a portable booth together, and that was pretty hilarious. So, but I love, yeah, I think having my friends, but the other people that I don't know, I really do like having them on because I learn. So there's two different things. One is learning stuff I don't know, and the other one's just goofing off with my friends.
Well, I think the one thing too that I think was different with your show than mine, I will say because I'm not think I'm being humble, but I will say that when I interview a guest like yourself, my guest is I find is always more interesting than I am because they're doing these great things. But because you are also a celebrity, do you find something that you're more interesting than your guest, and you're like, well, let me just tell you my stories because they're so much more interesting?
No.
No.
No, I think everybody has a story. I mean, I may interject some trying to add to the conversation my story too, but then I think after I listen to it, why did I even have to say that? Nobody cares. I'm supposed to be focused on my guest. But, that's my own character flaw I have to live with.
Well, I would say that's something I learned as or I'm learning as a host to try not to. I guess I think like every host has to determine: are you gonna be the star of your show, or are you gonna or the guest gonna be the star of your show? And it's easy. The decision was easy for me because the guest is more interesting than I am in almost every single situation. But I think that's something that's hard to
Well, I'm
determine.
very interested in you.
No, thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, is this your full-time job?
Oh no, I'm a special ed teacher at a junior high.
Well, that's fantastic. That is huge.
I do appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm a substitute teacher and I've subbed in special ed, and you've
Yeah.
got your work cut out for you. So,
Do do you ever use your voice talent in your substitute job?
yeah, I do. I mean, I've been doing it over 20 years. So when I first did it, when work was really slow, voiceover wise, I remember being in the elementary grades and I had to read a story. And so, of course, I changed my voice for the different characters. I remember this one little kid, he raises his hand, he goes, "What happened to your voice?" Well, Mrs. So and so never reads like that. I'm like, well, that's how I do it.
Were you were they the age where they knew the cartoons you were doing?
Well, the older ones. So when I started 20 years ago,
Yeah,
my high school students knew my stuff. Now they're all older. I still go to high school sometimes, but my stuff is kind of old for them. And a lot of the things that I've done lately are educational recordings.
hmm,
I do a lot of shows for younger kids, so they're too old for that. They're not interested. They do get excited when I tell them I was the voice of the Maharaja in Temple of Doom,
very
since
cool.
everybody's seen, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, so that gives me a little bit of cred. Um, and then sometimes they'll want to hear me do voices or they'll look me up. I don't use my last name when I teach because I want them to focus on what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
But if they happen to know, I'll say, okay, well, we'll talk about that at the end of class.
yeah. I will say my kids found my podcast this year. They located it. They'll every once in a while they'll go as I walk by. They're like travel on. Like ah, that's my outro. I was like, come on, let it
Well,
go.
that's great though, because they probably really dig that about you.
It is like what I used to do, not at this school, because but at the previous school, I used to have my guests sometimes would go on and Zoom with my kids to talk about projects and things like that, and that gave me some cool cred right there sometimes, and that
Yeah.
was kind of
Well,
nice.
you're a cool teacher.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So you're obviously doing a podcast, you're some voice acting, you're writing books. What else is are you doing right now in the world of
Well,
voice
I'm
acting?
excited because, well, I do a show. We're about to start recording next week, the third season on Answers TV of Lily's Lab. And I'm the voice of Lily the dinosaur, and we teach
Very cool.
science. Yeah. It's science based on biblical stuff. And also the voice of Pod for a new 4D virtual reality experience that's opening in March in Branson, Missouri, and also in Pigeon Forge, and it's called Truth Traveler. And so I'm the voice of the robot. And I just found out I'm going to Orlando February 7th through 9th for something called Anime After Dark at Orlando MegaCon.
Very
And so
cool.
we're going to do autographs. I really like going to conventions. That is fun. I'm recording some new audio drama. I got to go to Illinois to record. You think it's hard to go to Hollywood? I got to go there to record the audio drama, but that'll be fun. Um,
Now I gotta ask, from your conventions,
mhm.
what is your most requested character for autographs?
Right now. It seems to be Alex from Totally Spies.
Oh, very cool.
Um, and also the voice of Sailor Iron Mouse. So anime, those guys like that. But I think, yeah, Gummy Bears, and because they put it on Disney Plus,
Yep.
so that helped. And Totally Spies. There are a lot of people the age of the conventioners who know Totally Spies, so they think that's pretty cool.
Well, hopefully sometime you
And
can
Dungeons
show.
and Dragons because
Right.
of the movie and now it's back on TV,
See, see,
I
see,
believe.
see. I'd be
Streaming.
thinking Darkwing Duck because that show's even getting a reboot. So I figured Dark Muddlefoot would be
But
your.
it hasn't gotten a reboot and they aren't showing my character.
True, true.
So, yeah, I mean the stuff I've done, like you said, they were on TV a long time, but only people who watched it know about it because it's not running now. So how would
Mm,
all this new group of people even know about the shows because they're not airing?
true, true. But you should come try to get to Terrificon. So that's one in Connecticut. That's the one that of the three main ones in my vicinity, which is Terrificon, Rhode Island Comic Con, and Boston Fan Expo. Terrificon is by far the best run. It's actually at a
Well, I'll
casino.
ask my agent. It's all up to the people who put on the shows if they want us or not.
Well, tell you what, Terrificon, what the guy does at Terrificon, he's really cool. On Facebook, he'll often like once a year he'll be like, or a couple times a year he'll be like, "Who do you want at the show?" And people
Well,
will
you
throw out some
tell him you
names.
want me,
I'm
okay?
gonna throw out some names. I'll throw out your name.
Okay.
We'll certainly. I do every
And
year,
we
so I'll
can
throw out a
do
couple.
panels. We've done, my agent has like me, if you like Dungeons and Dragons, to get Willie Ames and me and Don Most together would be awesome for a panel. I could do a My Little Pony panel. I could do,
Well, but Miss Lee, it was an absolute honor to speak with you. Like I said, you voiced some of my childhood favorites, so thank you so much.
thank you so much for having me, Jeff. It's
Totally my
wonderful.
pleasure. Have a
All
very good
righty.
night.
Good night.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Virgin Stars podcast. Please like and subscribe. Turn for the next episode when Matthew K. Manning boards the mothership to discuss Pause from Storm King Comics. To next voyage, travel on.